Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Gittin daf Kuf Gimel. We're at the Mishnah on the bottom of daf Kuf Bet, so we'll get started. We'll just jump right in. Let me just share my screen and we will get going. So the Mishnah talks about who can write a get. Hakol ksherim lichtoves a get. Everyone can write a get. Afilu cherish shota v'katan. Even the three categories that are often excluded from many things. Even a cherish, somebody who is deaf and mute and unable to speak and therefore unable to communicate and considered therefore not a bar das, somebody with sufficient intelligence and abilities from an intellectual perspective. A shota, that's somebody who has no understanding of sort of the world around them, so they're able to communicate, but they indicate a lack of understanding of the world around them, and therefore are also considered somebody who is not a barda, somebody who lacks a sufficient intelligence and a capability to engage in certain activities. And this is not, just to be clear, this doesn't mean that we're just talking about somebody who's suffering from some mental condition. This is, it's got to be somebody who's, has no regard to property, has no regard to understanding of people's spaces. I mean, this is real, of their own space. This is not just some kind of, well, it's not temporary for one, but it's also, not a mild incapacitation. We're talking about something much more severe. And a katan, somebody who is under the age of majority, whether that's 12 for a girl, 13 for a boy. The point is that, again, they have not yet finished the development. It's not to say that they aren't smart. It's not to say that they're not able to think. It's not to say, but it's that their brains have physically not developed to the point where they can make reliable decisions that we would be able to rely on. So those are the three categories, and we're going to refer to them as lav b'nei deya in a moment, and so it's just important to understand that concept. But on the other hand, ha'isha koseves es gita, a woman can even write her own get. And a man can even write his own receipt, meaning that they could potentially trade. Again, she gets the get, he gets the receipt, and everybody's happy. Meaning, the point is that when he pays her the ketubah payment that is associated with the get, so then he gets a receipt that is supposed to go from her to him. So here he's going to write the receipt on her behalf, and then she's going to give it to him. And similarly, she's going to write the get on his behalf, and he's going to give it to her. So all of that is totally fine, because she'ain kima get ela b'chosma. Because in each of these cases, the validation of although we use the term get here, it probably means document more broadly, because we're talking about both the shover and the get. So the point is that those kinds of documents, they are validated by the people who sign on them. Oh, 1 second. Who I don't understand. How in the world could this possibly happen? How could we allow a chereshota, a katan, to sign a get? That's what the Gemara wants to know. We're going to offer 3 different answers. So answer number 1, Amar Rav Huna says, as we turn to Kav Gimel Amud Aleph, V'hu shehaya gadol omed al gabav. We're talking about a situation where an adult is standing over the person and watching to make sure that they do everything correctly. So Amar le Rav Nachman, 1 second. If you're going to tell me that the situation is where we're talking about an adult watching over the person's shoulder, what about if there was a non-Jew? Our Mishnah didn't say anything about a non-Jew. So what would the story be? Hachinami de kosher? Are you going to tell me that it's also kosher? And if you do say that, and if you say that, nami v'hatanya, we have a brisa that seems to say the exact opposite, because what does it say? Ovid kochavim pasul. A non-Jew is not kosher to serve. And so as a result, we now have the problem. So we wanted to say that it's talking about an adult, but the problem is that what if there's an adult overseeing a non-Jew, and that shouldn't work either. So the answer is it's a big difference, right? Because if I'm overseeing a katan cherish katan shotav katan, if I'm overseeing somebody who lacks the necessary understanding, well, I can be their understanding. I can tell them, okay, write an aleph now. Now write a bet. Now write a gimel. And through my overseeing them, they'll be able to do each of the things that I say as I instruct them. But an Ovid Kochavim, he's got his own intelligence. He's not going to do it because I'm saying it. He's going to do things for his own reasons, and he has the ability to decide whether or not he wants to do it. And so as a result, maybe we could differentiate. And so that's the explanation according to Rav Huna. So answer number one is that there's an adult supervising, and adult supervising doesn't work with a non-Jew because the non-Jew has his own intelligence. Okay. So that's answer number one. Answer number two, Hadar Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman thought about it and said, you know what? I am not right. Actually, maybe we could say that a non-Jew does have an ability to write a get. Lav milsahida amri. It's not like what I said. When it comes to the bringing a get, we're going to see in a moment later today, very shortly, that a non-Jew is not allowed to bring a get. The Mishnah will explicitly exclude him, but yet here he was not explicitly included. Miklal dila inyan ksiva kasher. That implies that when it comes to writing, he is considered qualified. So as a result, actually we can say that even if and maybe we don't even need to deal with an adult overseeing, because Vatanya. And so in a second. And now, what do we do about that other brisa? Vatanya oviko chavim pasul. We said we're now at the top of Kaf Gimel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down. Vatanya oviko chavim pasul. And so we said that a non-Jew is invalid for making a get. So how can you say, according to what you just said, Rav Nachman, that an Ovid Kochavim is valid? Hahi Rebbe Lazar. The Baraisa reflects Rebbe Lazar, because the Amar Edi Mesira Karti. Rebbe Lazar is the one who says that you need the witnesses on the giving. Now, because he requires witnesses on the giving, where does he interpret the requirement of writing a get lishma? He says that refers to the writing itself, meaning the words of the get itself, not the signatories, but the words of the get itself have to be written lishma. So when it comes to the brisa that says that we're disqualifying a non-Jew, that's Rebbe Lazar. But when it comes to our Mishnah is actually Rebbe Meir. So, and what does Rebbe Meir say? Well, let's take a look and we'll see. Amar Rav Nachman, Omer Haya Rebbe Meir. Rebbe Meir used to say, Afilu matzao ba'ashpa chasamo nisano la kasher. That if you were to find a get that just happened to have your name on it and your wife's name on it in a trash heap, but it was not signed, so there just happened to be another person named John and another person named Jane, and they just happened to decide, you know what, we're not going to get divorced. Wonderful, we'll live happily ever after. And now they throw away their get. And another John happens to be going through the garbage, and that's probably why his wife is divorcing him. And so he goes, and he says, "Oh, I found a get that works for me and my wife Jane. She's already complaining about my going through the garbage, so I'm going to get divorced." So as a result, he finds the get and he says, "Okay, I'm going to have it now signed, and I'm going to give it, and it is going to be kosher according to Rebbe Meir." Well, if a get that's found in an ashba, in a garbage, is kosher, well then kal v'chomer, on some level, a get that is written by a katan, a shota, or a cherish is going to be kosher. Meaning, who cares who writes it? All that Rebbe Meir cares about
is the signing on the get, because for him, the signing on the get is what's key for a get. And that is when we say kasav law, that you have to write for her, that there's a requirement of lishma, it's talking about the signing on the get, not the writing of the words of the get. And Isvei Rava Rav Nachman. So now Rava is going to question Rav Nachman 3 times, and he's going to now clarify exactly this point. Because of law, I don't understand. You said because of the Torah says, because of law. That means lishma. It's got to be written lishma. My lav b'ksivas again. Doesn't that obviously mean that it's the writing of the get itself, the words that this man is going to divorce this woman on this day? Isn't that what has to be written lishma? And the Gemara answers, no, lo, chasimas edim. It's referring to the signatures of the witnesses on the get. That is Rebbe Meir's view. Okay, and so Esvei Rava. So now Rava asks again, and now he's going to challenge. So that was challenge number 1. And challenge number 1, that's the answer. The answer is that when the Torah says kasav law, it's referring to the signatures according to Rebbe Meir. According to Rebbe Lazar, it's referring to the actual writing. It makes a little bit more sense from that perspective. But Esvei Rava now is going to point out a Mishnah and a Baraisa that seem to contradict him. We have a Mishnah that says, Kol get shenichtav shelo l'sham isha pasul. I don't understand. You're telling me that it's referring to the signatures that are written on the get, but we have a Mishnah that specifically says that any get that was not written for this particular woman is invalid. Doesn't that clearly indicate that we're talking about the writing of the words of the get itself and not the signatures? So Gemara answers, no. No, what it's saying is that when the witnesses sign and do the writing of their names, that's what needs to be lishma. That's what, and so if they don't do it for this particular case, so then it's going to be invalid. So Esvei, again, we have another challenge. Kishahu Kosvo, we have a brisa that says that when the man writes the get, Ki'ilu Kosvo Lishma, it's as if he writes it for her sake. Meaning, again, and it's just to be clear, when he writes the reference in this brisa is to a portion of the get. So when he writes a certain portion of it, namely the toref, that's the key part. So then it's as if he wrote even the tofes intentionally. So my lav kishu kosel the toref lishma kilu kosel the tofes lishma. Isn't this telling us that when he writes the toref, the key part, the names, his name, her name, and the date, that means it's as if he's now written the entire document lishma? Isn't that the reference in this brisa? And again, the answer is low. No, it is not. It's kishahu chosma lishma, that when the witnesses sign lishma, ki'ilu kosva lishma, then it's as if the entire document was written lishma. So we have now explained both the brisa and the Mishnah according to Rebbe Meir, even though when we might have originally thought that the language is really better fit with Rebbe Lazar. But now we can say, actually, we don't even have to say all of that. We don't have to stretch the language of this Mishnah and this brisa, because we could say, mani, who are these statements, the Mishnah and the brisa, really actually going like? Rebbe Lazar, those are statements of Rebbe Lazar. The Amar Edi Mesiru Karti, because he's the one who says that what matters is the witnesses on the transfer of the get, on the when it's given. And because he says that what matters is the witnesses when it's transferred, how does he understand the requirement of kasav law? It refers to the language of the get itself, and specifically the man's name, the woman's name, and the date. And so that's what it's referring to. Okay, so now that we've got that, so now we've got two. Great, perfect. We've read that. So we now have two answers. Answer number 1 is actually you do need the writing to have some amount of lishma. So it could be Rebbe Lazar, it could be Rebbe Meir, well, it could be Rebbe Lazar. And we're talking about where an adult is supervising. And so the adult is effectively providing the lishma content for the person who's not a bardas.
Right.
Okay, so that's answer number one. Answer number two is actually our Mishnah is not like Rebbe Lazar at all. Our Mishnah is like Rebbe Meir. Rebbe Meir doesn't care whether you find it in the garbage. So of course anybody can write a get. Of course, anybody could write it. You could find it in the garbage, so it could have been written by a Katan Shota B'Cherish. It doesn't make a difference. So as a result, that's why our Mishnah is saying that.
Who is responsible for the validity of what's in the get?
Well, remember, all that matters is that when the witness is signed, they see that the facts of the get are true. And so if, in fact, because that's exactly what Rebbe Meir says is key.
They have to read the get.
Yes, oh, absolutely. The signatures
Right.
on the, and this was the discussion that we had the last few days, that the witnesses on the get have to read the get and understand it. Absolutely. And that's why if they don't speak the language, it has to be explained to them. And that's why if they don't know how to sign, once it's been explained to them, we will help them sign by essentially creating a stencil according to one opinion, creating grooves according to the other opinion. But the point is that we've got this different, that's exactly right. So that's approach number two. Now we're ready for approach number three. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, V'hu sheshayir makom haTorah. No, we could be talking about Rebbe Lazar. And we could talk about where there's nobody overseeing it, because what are we talking about the writing of? We're not talking about the writing of the man's name, the woman's name, and the date. Those are the Torah. That's the key part. That's what needs lishma. And here we're talking about where the rest of it is being written. And it's only the tofes that's being written by the Katan, Cherish, and Shota. So, and in fact, we have a similar statement of Rav Chaga in the name of Ula. Again, you leave over the place of the Torah. Rebbe Lazar, and this is Rebbe Elazar, because Rebbe Elazar is the one who says that the get itself has to be written lishma. But what does he refer to? He's referring to the Torah. The Torah has to be written lishma. Again, that means his name, her name, and the date. Rabbi Zrika Amar Rabbi Yochanan ain't a Torah. But Rabbi Zrika said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that this is not correct. Namely, what does that mean? My ain't a Torah. What does it mean that this is not the thing that you should be teaching? So Amar Rabbi Abba kan hodiacha she'ain koach lishma the Rebbe Meir he. Really, no. If you take a look at the wording of our Mishnah, it seems clear that our Mishnah is really Rebbe Meir. It's really going according to somebody who says, who cares about the writing? And so as a result, to Amar Edi Chasimakarta, because he's the one who says that all that matters when we say Lishma is the witnesses on the document. That's the requirement of Lishma. Well, one second, now we've got an inconsistency. Because on the one hand, we have Rabbi Zrika, who says that actually that our Mishnah it should be interpreted as being Rabbi Lazar. V'hamar Rabba bar bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lazar he. Well, one sec, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Rabbi Zrika is the one who says that this interpretation is not right. So as a result, Rabbi Zrika is saying that the interpretation should be like Rabbi Meir. But we have a Rabbi bar bar Chana, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lazar he. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi bar bar Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan back on Kaf Aleph Amud Bet, he said that the Mishnah over there was really like Rabbi Lazar. And from the fact that he would assign that Mishnah to Rebbe Lazar shows that he believes that the halakha is like Rebbe Lazar. So we have now two statements in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. One statement by Rebbe Zrika seems to indicate that the halakha is like Rebbe Meir. Mm-hmm. And a second statement by Rabbi bar bar Chana seems to say that the halakha is like Rebbe Lazar. So so we have an inconsistency. So how do we resolve it? So Amarayin, who basically there are two Amarayim, and they disagree about what Rabbi Yochanan said, Va'aliba de Rabbi Yochanan. And so there are two different viewpoints as to what Rabbi Yochanan said. According to Rabbi Zikra, Rabbi Yochanan agreed with Rabbi Meir, and according to Rabbi bar bar Chana, he agreed with Rabbi Elazar. So now we have all of that clarified. And again, We ended up with 3 answers. Answer number 1, we're talking about a gadol overseeing it. Answer number 2, it's all according to Rabbi Meir, and who cares who wrote it. And answer number 3 is we distinguish between the toref and the tofes. The toref is what has to be written by an adult, and we care about Lishma. The tofes, who cares who writes it? Anybody can write it. And so as a result, that's what our Mishnah is talking about. Okay, so I'll kol ksherim lahavias a get. Now we talk about the bringing of a get. So, I'm sorry, I didn't scroll. So, okay, so now we're talking about the bringing of a get. So, who is it that's able to bring a get? Hakol ksherim lahavias a get. Chutz mechereshot v'katan v'suma v'od kachavim. Everybody can bring a get, with the exception of chereshot v'katan, who obviously are not bardas, so we can understand that. A summa, a blind person who has intelligence, and we're going to ask about that in the beginning of the Gemara. And somebody who's not Jewish. That's also often a simple category, but we'll see it's not so simple here either. What if you have somebody who was not valid as a messenger when they received the get, but then he became valid during the course of it and delivered it in a valid state? So we have a katan that became an adult, a deaf mute who became capable of hearing, summa v'nispatach, or a blind person and he was able to see, his eyes opened, shota v'nishtapa, somebody who was insane and he recovered, ovekuchav v'niskayer, somebody who wasn't Jewish and he became Jewish, puzzle. All of those cases are puzzle, meaning you need to be valid when you receive the item. However, if you were originally able to hear and then you became deaf mute and then you were able to hear again, or if you were able to see, you became blind and you were able to see again, or so those shafur v'nishtama v'nishtata v'chazer v'nishtapa. So if you were capable of thinking, you had in some sanity, and then you became insane, and then you became sane again. Well, then in all of those cases, kasher, it's kosher. Anytime you begin and you end with your capabilities, then you are kosher. Okay, so those are that is our Mishnah, and now we're going to try to understand. Well, one second. Why is it that a blind person can't bring a get? We're going to offer 2 answers to that. So Bishlam Achereshot v'katan, we understand why Achereshot v'katan can't bring a get, because all of them lack the sufficient understanding and knowledge in order to be able to do it. Similarly, a non-Jew, and Rashi explains that when we say la bar haterahu, it means that their point is that they're not capable of marrying somebody. They're not in the parsha, as we say, of being able to marry or divorce a third part themselves. So if they can't do the act themselves, so we're not going to allow them to be the messenger in this case. Elasuma amilo. After all, a blind person, we at least presume at the moment, is able to give and receive a get, there and get married. So why shouldn't they be able to deliver the get? So Amar Rav Sheshes answers the more obvious answer. Why would it be? No, their person doesn't know. They're not able to see. They're not able to recognize who it is that gave them the get and who it is that they're giving the get to. So Maskivla, so Tosfos actually, it makes an interesting point. So let's jump to that Tosfos. We're doing okay on time. So Tosfos says, "Miminot lo uminot no." What does that mean? That you don't know from who it was given and from who it was taken, right? That's the problem with a blind person. Mikan mashma detzarich sheyakir hashliach shezehu abal v'zuhi ishto. That maybe you could say from here that the messenger needs to recognize the husband and wife. They need to have known them from before. But maybe you don't have to say that, because the dafka suma, because maybe it's specifically by a blind person, that you would be able to cause him to make a mistake. Therefore, so as a result, we're more concerned about the ability to confuse him. But when it comes to just the messenger, so then the messenger can just knock on the door of the right house and everything will be fine. Okay, so that's and of course they know what they did. So if there's a question after the fact, he'll be able to testify to it. Okay, but in any event, Maskif lo Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef is going to object to this answer. And of course, I think Rav Yosef himself was blind, so it makes a lot of sense that he might object to this explanation. If you are saying that a blind person doesn't know the people that they're dealing with, how in the world can a blind person ever be with their wife? Because how does he know that the blind person, that the person that he's with is the wife? Now, of course, you could say, well, the wife might testify that I'm your wife, but even if that were true, and even if that were sufficient, what if the wife is blind also? So what if they're both blind? So and moreover, there are other times where one cannot see one's spouse, meaning in the darkest night when you don't have electricity and power, and there are no fires that are in the house is basically pitch dark. And so as a result, how could any husband be with his wife at night? Meaning you don't know for sure that you're in the right place. And if all you need to be is in the right place, well, then the blind person can be in the right place when he gives the get. So again, why is it that this is not going to work? Rather, the fact is that they can recognize by voice. They recognize the voice. So as a result, they should be able to recognize by voice here, meaning you have not really given a great explanation for the situation. Ella Amar Rav Yosef says, we're talking about a situation where the get is being brought from overseas. And as a result, the person who's bringing it needs to be able to say, it was written in front of me and it was signed in front of me. And of course, a blind person cannot say that, meaning they can't say that they actually witnessed the signing because they don't see. So now we have an explanation that really that is just factual. It is a factual fact that they can't see. And so as a result, that's why they're not able to bring it. And now, so in some ways, Rav Yosef has sort of stood up for the rights of blind people to say, actually, we have more ability than you think. All right, so Amrle Abaye said to Rav Yosef, Elamiata, 1 second. In our Mishnah, before we get to our Mishnah, actually, from what you're saying, Pasuch Benistama, if you had somebody who could see when they were given, when the get was actually written and signed, so as a result, they are able to testify, and then they became blind. To Matzi Amar, he's able to say, we should say that it's kosher. But we have a problem because our Mishnah, when it talked about the case of changing status, we specifically say that we're talking about somebody who was able to see, then became blind, and then was able to see again, is kasher. Chazar v'nispatach, that in lo chazar v'nispatach lo. The implication is that the only reason, again, we're dealing a situation with two steps. First, the starting point was the person was able to see, and then he became blind, and then he became able to see again. But the implication is only if both of those steps happen. Lo chazar v'lo nispatak, if he doesn't become able to see again at the very end, the implication of our Mishnah is that he's not able to give the get. So the Gemara answers, no, you don't have to say that. Rav Yosef's answer is a valid answer. No, we can say that even if he was not able to see at the very end, the person is able to give the get. Because why did we talk about the starting good, going bad, getting good at the end? We talked about that case because of the case of a person who's sane, insane, and then sane. We needed to have, you still are going to need for that situation, you'll always need sanity at the end. Because if you don't have sanity at the end, we're not sure that it got to the right place. So time of the chazav v'nishtapa, that situation you need to get back to sanity. Halo chazav v'nishtapa lo. If he didn't, it would be a problem. So tani nami patuo v'nistama v'chazav v'nispatach. So we wanted to, because of we wanted a parallel language in our Mishnah. So we talked about the blind person who became, the seeing person who became blind and then regained their sight. But in fact, if the person was able to see at the start and saw the writing and the signing, well, then he would be able to deliver the get even if he became blind. So Amar Rav Ashi Dekanami. Actually, you can actually see that these words fit into our Mishnah, because what did we say? Zaklau kol shetchil v'sofa b'das kasher. We said that you need at the beginning and the end there to be das, intelligence, and we say that a blind person has intelligence. Below katani kol shetchil v'sofa b'kashrut kasher. We didn't say that they need to be qualified. We said that they just need to have dat at the end. So Shma Mina. So actually we could say that from this, that in fact, Rabbi Yosef's answer works. And in fact, the reason that we don't allow a blind person to bring a get is specifically in the case where the person needs to say b'fanei nechtam b'fanei nechtam. And if they wouldn't need to say it, so the implication is because a blind person can recognize somebody through their voice, so they would be able to bring a get from a husband to the wife. All right. So Ba'imi name Rabbi Ami. So now we're going to ask a related question. Okay, we're going to now talk about a slave, and that will be the topic for much of the rest of the Gemara until our next mission. So let's take a look. So by my name Rabbi Ami, Eved Shaliach. How about an Eved? We didn't talk about an Eved. An Eved is partially Jewish, right? They're subject to the time-bound to non-time-bound mitzvot that are positive and all of the negative commandments. So what about them? Are they allowed to be a shliach l'kabel get isha miyad bala, to accept a get, for a husband from the wife, from the husband for the wife? Amar lahu, Rabbi Ami said, well, the fact that our Mishnah says that a non-Jew is not allowed to, as we turn to Kufkim, bet miklal to Eved kosher, that implies that an Eved is kosher. So Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, no, ain't ha'eved nasa shliach. An Eved is not allowed to be a shliach. L'kabel get l'isha miyad bala, to receive a get from the husband to the wife. L'fisha eina b'toras gittin kedushin, because even though he's subject to certain time-bound mitzvot, he is not covered by the laws of marriage and divorce. He's just not covered by it. Now, what if you may say, well, 1 second, didn't we have a while ago, maybe a few days ago at this point, the whole story about writing a get on the slave? Why isn't that a case of the slave being a messenger? Well, Tosfos effectively answers that question in the second Tosfos on Kaf Gimel Amabet. Lafisha Einu B'Torah's Gittin V'Kedushin V'Hadan Mitgarashta Be'Eved. Hadan Mitgareshes Be'Eved. The fact that the woman is able to get divorced through a slave, law that belongs to her, it's not that this slave is serving as a messenger. It belongs to her, and so it's as if the writing on the slave is in her chutzner, in her courtyard, and that is sufficient for her to take possession of the item. And so it's not based on messenger status. So Maskevla, Rabbi Lazar now asked, and this is Rabbi Lazar the Amora, Taima, what's the reason of Rabbi Yochanan? The mills of delay say, right? It's because you're saying that the reason that the slave can't do a get is because isn't the laws associated with get don't apply to him. Haba milsa de ise, that implies that if in fact the slave had something where the laws did apply to him, kasher, he would be kosher as an agent. Well, in second, we have the situation of a non-Jew or a kuti. That's the Jews who did not convert correctly, and as a result, their Jewishness is questioned. That we say that they are allowed to take truma with respect to their own produce. That whatever they take as truma from their own possessions, that is considered truma. But utanan, and yet we also have a Mishnah that says, ain't truma so truma. If a non-Jew takes truma on behalf of a Jew, even if the Jew has given them permission, that is truma is not truma. So my taima, What's the reason? Lav mishum diksiv gamatem. We have a pasuk in connection with, in a couple of weeks, Parsha Yod, we're going to see that we have this pasuk that says that also you should separate truma with respect to for the Kohen. So why does it say gamatem? What do we learn from that? Ma'atem Yisrael, just as you are a Jew, Ashluchachem Yisrael, so too any messenger to accomplish the taking of truma also needs to be Jewish. So based on what we've seen, we see that the basis for the reason that a non-Jew can't take truma is not because they're not in the parsha of truma. Indeed, they are in the parsha of truma. It's because they are not Jewish, and we need gamatem. So too we should be saying with respect to the slave. The slave is not a full Jew, and so as a result, we should say that the reason is not because they don't have any aspect of marriage, but or divorce. It's because they aren't Jewish. So Amr debate Rabbi Yanai. So the yeshiva of Rabbi Yanai would answer this question by saying, "Lo, ma'atem b'nei bris, av shluchachem b'nei bris." No, when we say gamatem, we're not saying that they have to be full-fledged Jews. They just need to be subject to a bris. And Rashi explains, "Lo ma'atem b'nei bris mehulim." You have to have a milah. You have to be circumcised. Ubo b'brit mitzvot, and have some subject of being covered by mitzvot. And a slave does have that, whereas a non-Jew does not. So what do we end up with? We end up with two situations. We have a slave who is somewhat Jewish, and as a result, they can serve as an agent whenever the topic relates to them. It's something that they're covered by. But when you come to a non-Jew is not allowed to serve as an agent because they're not Jewish. All right, so those are the two different categories. And so now that we've explained that, we're going to talk about more slavery stuff. Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Yochanan, ein ha'eved na'aseh shliach. An eved is not able to become a messenger, lekabel get isha miyad bala, to receive a get from the husband to go to the wife. Lefi she'ena b'toras gittin v'kedushin, because they are not subject to the laws of get and to marriage. Ba'af al pi sheshaninu harei at shivcha uvladech ben chorin. Now, because that if you were to say that harei at shivcha, that you are going to be my shivcha still, that you are going to be my female slave, but uvladech ben churin, but your child who, because you're pregnant, is going to be free. You're allowed to say that, and the woman can effectively serve as the agent for her unborn child. V'im haisa ubra, and if she was in fact pregnant, zachsalo, she has acquired the freedom of the child. So my imhaisa ubra zachsalo, how in the world can it be that she can take possession of the freedom document, of the emancipation document on behalf of her child? Must be, right? It's because of the fact that she is like the agent. So how do we explain that? So ki asa Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda Amar. So when Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he explained Rabbi Yochanan Tartiam. Rabbi Yochanan actually made two statements that will seem to be contradictory, but then he explained how we understand them, or we will explain how we understand them. Nirim devarim sheha eved mikabel get lechabeiro. It seems like a slave can receive a freedom document for another slave, miyad rabo shel chabeiro, but it has to be from the owner of the other slave who is not this person's owner. Meaning, if I have two slaves, A and B, and I give a freedom document for B to slave A, nothing has happened. However, if I own slave B and somebody else owns slave A, and I give a freedom document to slave A, then he can acquire it on behalf of slave B, and slave B will be free. Avalo miyad rabo shelo, but it doesn't work with the own master. Im lechashcha adam lomar, and if you're going to say 1 second, zu halacha shnuya, 1 second, we have a different brisa. Im haisa ubra zachsalo. And what about the story where if the maidservant was pregnant, she acquires the freedom for the fetus, and that situation is the person who gives the get shikra, the freedom document, the emancipation document, that is the owner of the woman and the baby. So how in the world, in the one case, can there be a sense of agency, but in the other case, there not be a sense of agency? Meaning there is a sense of agency with respect to a person's own maidservant holding it for the fetus, but a person's own slave can't be an agent for another slave of that owner. So Amorlo, so explain to him, Shnei Gedolei Hador Pershu Es Hadavar. Two great rabbis explained this. Reb Zera, Reb Shmuel Bar Rav Yitzchak. Reb Zera and Reb Shmuel Bar Yitzchak, they explained Chad Amar Ha-Mani. Who is this? Rebbe he de Amar HaMeshachrer Chatzi Avdo Kana. That in fact, one of them said that if you free half of a slave, so then that slave can acquire it himself, meaning that effectively the ubar is part of the woman, and so as a result, she has become half freed, and it's as if that she's able to accept the half for herself. My time of the Rebbe Abaha. What's the reasoning of Rebbe with respect to this? Kasavar uber yerach imohu. Basically the baby is effectively like the thigh of the mother, meaning it's all part of the mom. And it's as if you were trying to enable the slave to acquire one of its limbs, one of the slave's limbs, and that is permitted. And so as a result, we see that actually there's no inconsistency here. And bottom line is, though, that a slave cannot be a messenger for something that he's not in the parsha in. Okay. So Av Hanashim She'ena Ne'emenis Lomar Meis Bala. So our next Mishnah addresses women who are not trusted to tell someone that her husband died, and we're going to discuss whether they can serve as a messenger. So let's take a look. Even a woman who is not believed to tell another woman, a specific woman, we'll see why, that her husband died, they are going to be trusted to bring the get. And who are these people? Chamosa, the mother-in-law. So we can see here that the conflict between mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law is one that goes back a long time. Uvas chamosa, and the daughter of the mother-in-law, meaning the husband's sister, the sarasa, and then the wife's co-wife, meaning if the husband is married to two women, so one of them can't testify to the death of the husband about the another woman. And the reason is we're worried again that the other woman will now have relations with another man, and now the husband will come back and she won't be allowed to return to him. And they have an incentive, right? The mom wants her son back, the sister wants her brother back, and so and similarly the co-wife wants the husband for herself. And similarly the husband's the husband's brother's wife, because she might end up being married to him. Uvas bala, and similarly the husband's daughter, meaning a stepdaughter for the wife. So in all these situations, there's a sufficient conflict that maybe we won't want her to testify to the death of the husband, but we'll allow testimony to the get. So why ma ben get lami? So what's the difference? Shahaksav mochiach. Here at least we have a written document that provides some evidence that in fact that gives them credibility, that allows them to testify. So ha'ishma atzma, in fact, a woman herself may be eskita, she can bring her own get. However, she's going to have to say that it was written in front of her and it was signed in front of her. Now, Vahatanya will take a quick look at the opening of the Gemara, and we have a brisa that says, "Kashem she'ein ne'emanos lomar bas ba'ala meis ba'ala," that just as these women are not believed to say that her husband died, kach ein ne'emanos lahevi gita, they also are not going to be believed to bring the get for this woman. That's complete Mishnah that we just learned. All right. So contradiction, and we're going to have to figure out that contradiction, God willing, on tomorrow's daf. So I wish you a wonderful, wonderful day. We'll revisit that question and take a look at some of the answers, God willing, tomorrow.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Be well. Bye-bye.